So we need to have at least, 25% control of Tunis. So Tunis is this trade node here, and we can click on it by clicking on the big box by Tunis. And this will tell us that we currently have 12% control over the trade node. We have no territory in Tunis. We're not particularly likely to have territory in Tunis, and at this point of the game, owning territory is the best way of gaining control over a trade node. Now, later on, this proposal for the Burghers, probably very easy. We would just shift our trade fleet and start controlling trade in Tunis. We don't have a trade fleet. Well, we probably do have a trade fleet, but we don't have a very good trade fleet. Early trade fleets are kind of bad. Late trade fleets are game-changingly strong. Early game, not so much. So that one's going to be difficult. Right now, probably not possible. So we're going to go with the clergy. So we now have a mission to increase relations with the Pope to 100%. And that leads to a very nice segue into the Catholic mechanics. So if you are playing as a Catholic, which is basically anyone in Europe, you will have this icon down here, which is the papacy. Click on it, and you will get the Holy See, which will look like this. We can see a couple of different pieces of information. The most important for us is this one here, the Papal Influence, and then these 8 buttons over here. So, what do these do? Well, the Papal Influence is exactly what it says on the tin. It is the amount of influence you have over the Pope. You will generate a bit of Papal Influence just as a default, 0.5 a month. That is not a lot. I'm going to tell you right now, that will not get you very much. However, you can increase the amount of Papal Influence you are generating through a number of different means. Number 1, controlling cardinals. You can gain cardinals in your country. If you have a cardinal in your country, each cardinal will provide 0.5 Papal Influence. You can get more cardinals by having good relations with the Pope. There are various events which can do it. You can bribe cardinals from others, again through events. Don't worry about that too much. And by improving relations with the Pope, you'll notice there at the bottom, it says that this increase, it's every year, not every month, it's a year. This is increased by your modifier with the Papal State. If you increase your Papal opinion of you, you gain more Papal influence. This is good because it means you can press these buttons more frequently. You will also remember that our Diet agenda is to increase relations with the Pope. So, we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm going to unpause for 2 days. And I'm also going to increase the speed. 2 days. Okay, so we have our diplomats back. So first things first, going to click on the Papal States. Diplomacy. And then we're going to open up the Relations Actions tab. And that will provide us with improved relations and send an insult. We're going to improve relations with the Pope. As I said, that is going to increase relations with them every month until we hit plus 100%. Confirm. So just the very act of sending a diplomat to them increases relations by plus 2. It will now go up to 125. This does, however, use that diplomat. So we are going to be 1 diplomat down because he is going to be on that mission until he has raised relations to 125. You can decide to maintain your diplomatic presence in that country in order to maintain that high relation. If you then pull them away, your relations will slowly go down again, though it is pretty slow. But right now, this guy is going to be busy with the Papal States, improving relations. Then once it hits 100, we complete that agenda. The higher it is, the more Papal influence we generate, and the more of these buttons we get to press. So why are these buttons important? Well, they let us do some pretty cool stuff. So the first one is, this will cost us 50 Papal influence, and it will increase the national tax modifier by plus 15%. If we just go over to our country and then the economy tab, we can see that taxation currently is the majority of the amount of money that our nation is making. Early on, taxation is incredibly important. Over time, it will be overtaken by trade and then probably production. Gold, depending on which state you are, some of the West African and Central American states, gold is very important. Probably also for us, Castile, honestly. But in the beginning of the game, taxation, very important. We currently have a 10% taxation efficiency because of the clergy. That would then be 25% with the Papal influence. That is going to be a hefty boost to our finances if we manage to levy the church tax. And that 15% bonus will last for a whopping 20 years. So yeah, it'll take you a bit of time to build up the influence to do it, but then for 20 years you're going to be super rich. You can bless your ruler, which will increase your prestige for 20 years. You'll remember that our prestige is really bad. We're already investing a little bit in that through our advisor and through the potential estate privilege, which we probably still need to do. But this is another way of gaining prestige. You can get an indulgence for your sins, which will increase your legitimacy. So right now, our legitimacy is very high. 100% is the maximum. It went down a little bit because we got some royal marriages. It's gone down even further, and it will continue to tick down because our prestige is very low. If we had high prestige, then legitimacy would naturally tick up. And if we wanted to increase the legitimacy gain, say, for example, if a pretender had just taken over the country, or if we had a disputed succession, something like that, then the way to get it would be indulgence for your sins. Next up, we have Beautify the Local Saint. This is incredibly powerful because it just gives you 1 stability. Stability is very expensive. So if we take a look at the Stability and Expansion tab, and then we hover over the stability section, which is over here, we can see that it goes from the -3 to the +3. Boosting it, you can spend some stability. So right now we have... Sorry, you can spend some admin points. Right now we have 42, however, boosting it to +1 will cost 130. That's actually not too bad. 130, it's expensive in admin points, but in terms of like the cost of stability, it's not terrible. The cost of that is increased by 30% because of the various councillors and advisory boards that we brought in. Remember, that's what's making the advisors cheaper. And it will go up by 50% for every plus that you have. So once you have +1 to +2, it will go up by 50%. +2 to +3, it will go up by 100%. It can get very pricey if you try to go above that. However, if you just press the Beautify Local Saint, you just gain +1 just like that. So if you're already at +2 and you want to get a cheap +3, this is probably a good option. Then we've got the Forgive Usury. This will make loans and interest cheaper. So if you're in a very brutal, expensive war and you find that you're having to utilize a lot of additional fundage through raising loans and getting extra money that way, then this can reduce how much interest you're paying and also the amount of inflation it costs you. And it will reduce the inflation that you have accrued over time. So every time you take a loan, your inflation goes up by 0.1%. So this will basically pay it off at a rate of 1 a year, so 1 loan per year. You can proclaim a holy war. This will increase your manpower recovery. So remember how I said that it takes 10 years for your manpower pool to recover completely from 0 to 100%. This will increase the rate of recovery by 15%. So every month you gain extra manpower. So currently we gain 252. And is it still 10 years? That might have changed. I feel like this is actually 30 years now. I don't remember. That might be one of the things that's changed in Emperor. But either way, it takes a while. Then you can send the Papal Legate, which will increase your diplomatic reputation. And again, that's important for making alliances. It's also very important if you have vassals that you're trying to annex, is you will annex them faster the higher your reputation is. And then finally, Sanction Commercial Monopoly, which honestly is the one I personally use the most, but that's because I tend to play with very, very, very trade-heavy nations. This basically increases the efficiency of your trade. So if you are a trading power, then you probably will be sanctioning commercial monopoly. Also, this one I personally like a lot because the others tend to be temporary benefits, like the 20 years or the stability, which can go up and down. Mercantilism only goes up unless you get some really nasty events. So this is basically a permanent bonus, so that's just another benefit that one has. Okay, what else do we need to talk about here? So the Holy See has a Curia, and the person who controls the Curia is known as the Curia Controller. The Curia Controller is dependent on how many cardinals that nation has and then how much influence they've invested in. So you can effectively pay to convert papal influence into investiture, and then the investiture gives you a chance of becoming the next papal controller. So if you're interested in getting some extra bonuses from the Catholic faith and you want to have more control over the papacy itself, and there are a number of bonuses related to that, then again you will need to have high papal influence. There are other mechanics related to this. So for example, you have the Curia coffers. This is more relevant to the papal controller and to the Pope themselves, We will deal with that if and when it comes up. That's, again, more advanced. You don't really need to worry about it. The main thing that a Catholic nation needs to know is about the clicky buttons and how to get the clicky buttons more often by increasing papal influence, which is done by getting more cardinals or by increasing papal relations. Huzzah! Can you be the Pope? Yep, you can be the Pope. How do you feel about the always stay at +1 stability? Because you might as well, because it costs the same strategy. Huzzah! Generally I do. If I have some extra admin power, then I will generally boost stab to +1. However, because I pay republics, and republics tend to have incredibly expensive stability increasing costs, I don't always bother. As a monarchy though, yes, it's good practice. Oh, beginner friendly, that would be me then. I bought the full game and DLC from Humble a while back. Still getting over the hump. Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a learning curve to this game. I don't think it's as bad as people make out to be, and I don't think it's as bad as it can itself pretend to be. There's a lot of different options, there's a lot of different tools, but you don't need to use them all. There's just kind of this base level of information you need in order to start playing. And then from there you can delve further in as different things interest you. For example, the economy. The most important thing is balancing your books. You're either making money or you're losing money. But then you can also leverage loans, you can start using mercenaries, you can worry about levels of taxation, the efficiency of your trade networks. That's all the deeper stuff that you don't necessarily need to understand at first. And a lot of the complexity, I think, is because of the depth and the perception that, oh my gosh, I need to understand everything. You don't. You just need to kind of understand the basics. And then everything else are just the tools of how to manipulate things more. Right, so we've done the advisors. We've done the opening diplomacy. The final thing that we need to do before truly unpausing, and I really shouldn't have unpaused there for those 2 days, I just wanted to progress time to show you that stuff, are the rivals. So, one of the great things about Europa Universalis IV is the rival system. This is basically a way to keep diplomacy dynamic. Once you make an alliance with somebody, that alliance isn't necessarily for life. There are things you can do to make it very likely that that alliance will stick around, but the changing situation in the game will also influence your diplomatic relations with people. Somebody that you were very firmly allied to for a long time might suddenly have conflicting interests, and you'll need to break the alliance and possibly even go to war with them. It happens. It doesn't just happen to you as the player though, it happens to the AI factions, and this is truly one of the great things about this game, because things are constantly changing. If you feel like at some point that you are losing because 3 or 4 major powers have just declared war on you, and oh my gosh, everyone's bullying you and you're dying, it's all going terrible, well, there's a good chance that once they've picked on you for a bit, they'll start picking on each other, because suddenly the balance of power has shifted and their own priorities have changed. So, for example, if England and Castile are allied together, are fighting against France, France is going to feel a little hemmed in and may lose a war or two. Once France's power has been kind of curtailed, then England and Castile are going to look at each other going, actually, you're a bigger threat now than France was. I'm going to need to do something to contain your expansion. And then suddenly France and England and Castile have the rivalry, and then France can go, oh, Austria is actually concerned about the growing strength of Castile, so Austria is going to make an alliance with me in order to keep me in the game and keep me strong. Okay, now I'm allied with Austria. Political situation has completely shifted, and that can really change the dynamics in this game. And one of the ways that that is kind of enforced is through the rivalry system. So you always, mostly, need to have 3 countries that you are rivaled against. As a smaller country, those rivals will probably shift more frequently depending on how well you're doing and how well they're doing. As the bigger nations, those rivals would tend to be a little bit more static, simply because you are the bigger nations and your own power base doesn't change that much. So, for example, if you're playing as Lubeck and you go from a 1 province minor to a 5 province minor, your power is effectively increased by 5 times. If you're Castile and you gain an extra province, that's a tiny increase in strength compared to what it could have done for you. So generally at the start, you're going to have the big powers rivaled against the big powers, and you can only be rivaled against people of a similar strength to yourself. So you're not going to have the situation where Lubeck is rivaled against England, at least not at the start of the game, nor you're going to have a situation where Muscovy is rivaled with Brittany simply because they're too far away. There are a number of different factors which manipulate who your rivals can be. You can see who your rivals are. That's what these listed enemies are. So right now, our enemies are England, Burgundy, and France. And hovering over the shield, you can actually get a highlight of what those countries are. So that means that England, Burgundy, and France have all rivaled against us. So I formed a little bit of a power block, but there's a very good chance that England and France are also rivals of each other. So we almost certainly want to begin considering who we want to fight against. So France right now, if we click on France, we can see who their enemies are. Burgundy and Austria. Actually, England is not rivaled with France. Okay, alarm bells ringing. This might well bring in a little bit more peaceful relations between England and France, except for the fact that England still owns a bunch of territory in France. These two getting along, unlikely. France and Burgundy, possible, but by the fact that Burgundy and France are both mutually rivals, very unlikely. Burgundy is also stronger than they actually look. So you can see that Burgundy is this burgundy colour country. On the face of things, they're rivaled with France and with England. How on earth are they even close in power? Well, they are kind of similar to Denmark in that they have vassals. I mean, Denmark has Norway and Sweden under their control. These are both in the personal union. Burgundy has a bunch of vassals, including Flanders, Brabant, Holland, and a couple of others. And in fact, if we go to the diplomatic map mode and then click on diplomatic and then click on Burgundy, it will show us exactly what the relations Burgundy has with other countries. So we can see the cyan colour. These are all the vassals that they have got. So as I was saying, just because I know this, Flanders is in their personal union. Sorry, it's not a vassal. Brabant, Holland, Nevers, and that's also Nevers. This is all actually Burgundian. If Burgundy goes to war, these guys join them. Vassals and personal unions always join their overlords in wars, with one exception with vassals, and that's if they're paying scutage. Advanced. Don't worry about that. Generally, if you see somebody as a vassal of somebody else, then you should be considering that vassal as part of the war. So the other way of seeing this is if we click on Burgundy and then click on diplomacy, we can hover over junior partners and we can see those countries, and it will actually highlight who those guys are with the shields. So Burgundy is actually fairly substantially stronger than they look at first glance, and it is always worth doing your homework to see who exactly is allied with whom. So similarly, if we go to France, we can see that France has a bunch of vassals: Armagnac, Auvergne, Bourbonnais, Foix, and Orléans. And again, if we go to the diplomatic map mode and click on France, then we can see those countries also highlighted. If they are this cyan colour, then they are a vassal. So France is actually quite a bit stronger, and all of these other countries will be fighting on France's side because they are subservient to the French. What's the difference between a vassal and a personal union? So vassals have very little hope of getting independence. They are a semi-independent nation, which is very likely to get gobbled up at some point in the future. They're kind of a diplomatic tool to expand without angering as many people, because you're still keeping up a pretense of their sovereignty. A personal union, on the other hand, can split more easily. Generally, if your prestige falls into the negatives, then that personal union will end. It's also possible for other countries to get involved in dispute successions and things like that. Personal unions you also have less power over, so vassals have to pay you a certain amount of money every month. Junior partners don't, although you can extort money from them. So part of it is your relations with them, what actions you can take against them, and then how closely tied to you they actually are. Vassals are very closely tied, personal unions not as closely. So it's far more likely that you would see Norway and Sweden splitting away from Denmark, if you ignore outside factors, than if you saw Holland, no, that's a bad example. Then if you saw the French miners splitting away from France.